بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسوله الكريم وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Brothers and sisters, I on behalf of the Untitled Society welcome each and one of you to today's program here at the center with the best of all greetings, with the greetings of Islam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Inshallah, as we begin, I'd like to quickly take this opportunity to introduce Sheikh Dr. Tahir Wyatt, who is a published academic, experienced interpreter and instructor of Islamic studies and comparative religion. During his 21 years of studying and teaching in Saudi Arabia, he accomplished several degrees, including a doctorate in theology. He was also the only American ever to be appointed to teach in the Prophet's Mosque in Medina, the second holiest site in the Muslim world. Dr. Wyatt currently lectures both nationally and internationally at mosques, universities, and other institutions of learning. He serves as the executive director of the United Muslims Masjid in Philadelphia and is the president of the Quran, Arabic, and Reflection Institute, an institute dedicated to structured, curriculum-based instruction of the Quran and the Arabic language. Here we are today, gathered once again after the first session, the first part of the same series, the 5 keys to success. And inshallah ta'ala, we shall be proceeding with the 4th and the 5th key to success, which is going to be dealt here in this world, inshallah ta'ala. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help us all benefit from this ilm and to accept from us all the effort that we're placing into it, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings about a positive effect in all of our lives. Jazakallahu khairan. Inshallah, I ask Sheikh Dr. Tahir Wyatt to begin.
إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا وسيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا إلى يوم الدين أما بعد فالسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. By a show of hands, how many of you were here for the first session back in November? Just so I can get an idea. Oh wow, okay. Khair. طيب. Before we actually get into today's topic, let me just remind you all of the importance of what we're doing here today. Our Lord subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the Quran, أَفَحَسِبْتُمْ أَنَّمَا خَلَقْنَاكُمْ عَبَثًا وَأَنَّكُمْ إِلَيْنَا لَا تُرْجَعُونَ. Did you think that we created you in play? For no purpose whatsoever, without purpose, and that you will not be returning to me? In other words, a believer at all times is conscious of the fact that we are accountable for what we do in this life. We are accountable for how we use Allah's blessings. ثُمَّ لَتُسْأَلُنَّ يَوْمَئِذٍ عَنِ النَّعِيمِ. Then you will be asked on that day about the na'im, the blessings that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you, the favors that He has given you. And one of the greatest favors that we all have, in fact, we're equal in the amount that we're given in a day, but we're different in how we use it, is time. Time is a great blessing, especially if you have free time. And this is why our Prophet ﷺ called free time a ni'mah. He says, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, نعمتان مغبون فيهما كثير من الناس الصحة والفراغ. There are 2 blessings that many people are مغبون فيهما, and most of the time people translate this as they are cheated out of them, or they don't take advantage of these two blessings. And the word ghabn here, just so that we understand, if you go to the marketplace, how much does this cost? 1 dirham? 2? If you go to the airport, how much is it? 5. Okay. If you go to the regular souk, and you don't know, you're not from Dubai, you don't know how much this costs. In America, this costs $1. It doesn't cost 1 dirham. All right? So somebody tells you at the regular baqala here, they tell you, no, this is a 4 dirham. Okay? Coming from America, 4 dirham, okay, it's like $1, okay, it's fine. But you're from here, when you go to the souk, you know that this is supposed to be how much? 1 dirham. So if you pay 4 dirham for it and somebody else comes and they say, how much did you pay for that? You said, I paid 4 dirham. They say, no. In Arabic, they would say, anta maghboon, that you were what? Cheated. You got cheated in the souk. So the same thing the Prophet ﷺ says about time. He says that there are 2 blessings. نعمتان مغبون فيهما كثير من الناس. A lot of people are cheated when it comes to these 2 favors because they're not using them properly. One is their free time, and the other is their health. And that's because there are things that you can do when you are healthy that you just cannot do when you're not feeling well. And so you have to take advantage of those 2 things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed you with. And one of the best things that you can do with your time is what you're doing right now, which is trying to learn more about your deen. Ibn Mas'ud radiyallahu ta'ala anhu said, ما ندمت على شيء ندمي على يوم غربت شمسه نقص فيه أجلي ولم يزد فيه عملي. He said, I didn't regret anything the way I regret a day that goes by. غربت شمسه. The sun of that day sets. My time on earth has decreased, but my actions have not increased. My deeds have not increased. And Al-Hasan Al-Basri rahimahullah ta'ala said, Ya ibn Adam, innama anta ayyam. O son of Adam, you are nothing but days. You are the sum total of what you are is just days on this earth. فَإِذَا ذَهَبَ يَوْمٌ ذَهَبَ بَعْضُكَ. So when a day goes by, part of you also goes by. And so it's very important that we take a portion of our time and dedicate it to learning the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because you weren't created for a career. Yes, you may need a career to provide for yourself, to provide for your family. You were not created for play. Yes, you may need to play sometimes, relax, amuse yourself so that you can refresh yourself for work and these type of things. But this is not what you were created for. And the hereafter is much longer than the dunya. In fact, there's no comparison. And that is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls the hereafter your real life. وَإِنَّ الْآخِرَةَ لَهِيَ الْحَيَوَانِ لَوْ كَانُوا يَعْلَمُونَ. And the hereafter is the real life, if they only but knew. So taking time in this life to prepare for the next is very important. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has sent down to us the Quran so that we can know Him subhanahu wa ta'ala and know what He requires of us so that we can be successful in this life and have salvation in the next. And that is why when we study the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we're trying to study as closely as we can the texts, the revelation, so that we know what it is that is going to draw us closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we started our study, this particular study, which was termed or called 5 Keys to Success. And that is because the success of this life, real success in this life, is not measured by the prestige of your career. It's not measured by how much money you have. There's a lot of people that used to be millionaires yesterday. They're not millionaires today. People who were poor yesterday, they're self-made, millionaires and billionaires today. It doesn't mean that they are successful. In fact, success is measured by your connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because that's what brings about happiness. Have you ever heard, by a show of hands, have you ever heard of somebody who has a lot of money but yet committed suicide? Yes? Okay, we all have heard about famous people with a lot of money, but they still commit suicide. To go to the point where you commit suicide, you have to hit the ultimate low. It's not just that you're unhappy, you have actually given up all hope on life. How does that happen when a person has so much? It's because the key to success is not money. You need some money. We're not advocating that you need to be poor. But that is not the key to success. The key to finding happiness is that you have a real bond with the one who created you. Think about a child who has all of the material things that they could need. They have toys, they have a nice house, they have all of the things that you can think of that a child would need. But their parents live in another country. How do you think that child feels? We know that happens. That happens here in the Middle East a lot. People leave their children back in certain places. They come here to work so that they can support their families back home. Do you think the child is more happy when the parents are away or when the parents are close? When the parents are away? Oh, close. I was going to say that maybe the mean parents, the children don't want to be around them. Right. Normally when the parents are close, the children, because they have that natural connection to their parents and they want to be loved by their parents. They need that feeling of affection. And even if they have all of these material things, it doesn't make them as happy. Similarly, our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who has created us, we have a natural desire to have a connection with our Creator. Things happen in life that take us away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sometimes it may even affect our nature to some degree, where we don't even realize that that's what we're looking for, but we feel this void inside. We want to feel whole again, but that's not going to happen until we are connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we talk about 5 keys of success. We're talking about the fact that in order to attain and achieve real success in this life, we have to know who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is, and we have to know His deen, what He wants from us, how we're supposed to be living. And so what we've chosen here are 5 qawa'id min qawa'id al-Islam. 5 huge maxims, universal principles from the principles of the religion of Islam. And we took these straight from a very important book called Al-Qawa'id wal-Usul al-Jami'ah by Sheikh Rahman bin Nasir al-Saadi rahimahullah ta'ala, who's famous for his tafsir. And this book, Al-Qawa'id wal-Usul. Al-Qawa'id, the maxims, and Usul, the principles that are comprehensive, which means that there are many aspects of our deen, the deen of Islam, that come under these principles. So when we're talking about principles of Islam, we're not talking about individual texts from the Quran and Sunnah. We're talking about broad principles that are based on the texts. So does anybody remember, for those of you who were here at the last one, because this is going to help you understand what we're covering, anybody remember one of the principles we covered last time? Anybody? You can just raise your hand and then I'll point to you. You can shout out. The longer you oh, alhamdulillah. I was going to take a coffee break. Go ahead. Okay, that's 2 different things. Which one you want to pick? Yeah, go ahead. طيب. We did cover that, but that's not the principle. He said the means don't justify the ends. That is true, but what was the principle? Yes.
Benefits and detriments. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands us to do something which is either partially beneficial or entirely
Okay, perfect.
beneficial.
All right, so this is the first principle that we covered. And we're going to go over 1, 2, 3, just so that we can get us to point 4, inshallah. Number 1 was that everything that Allah commands in the religion, everything that He has legislated in the deen of Islam, is either entirely beneficial or it is overwhelmingly beneficial. It is either entirely beneficial or mostly beneficial. And everything that Allah has prohibited is either entirely detrimental, yani it's bad, or it is mostly bad. Okay. How does this help you understand Islam? This helps us understand something very important about the religion of Islam, and that is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants good for His servants, that everything that He has told us to do in His infinite knowledge and wisdom, al-alim al-hakim subhanahu wa ta'ala, that He knows that this thing is good for us. Either entirely good for us or it is mostly good. And that's so important for us to understand. Because we may, and we have to understand, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not command us to do anything for His benefit. Allah does not benefit from our worship. What do we benefit from salat? Allah commanded us to pray. How many times? 5 times a day. You have to pray 5 times a day. And listen, if you don't pray 5 times a day, it does not have the effect that it is supposed to have. So don't think that, oh no, well, I'm almost there. You know, I'm praying most of the 4 times a day. I just don't feel the same, I don't get all the benefit of the prayer. Let me ask you something. This room has how many walls? 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And it has a roof. That's number 5. If the roof was gone, would it protect us from the sun? That's number 5. If you don't pray all 5, it's not going to protect you the way that it should. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us 5 for a reason, because that's where the benefit, there's a benefit to that 5. Anyway, the point is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not command us anything with anything except that it is either beneficial and totally beneficial or mostly beneficial. What is something that has some harm in it, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has legislated for us to do it? It's made it permissible. Anybody? Yes? I didn't say it, he did. Marrying, or let's just say the system of polygyny, which is the permissibility for a man to marry more than one woman. Is there some detriment to that? Is there something bad in that? Yes. Yes, there is. Just ask the sisters on this side. They'll tell you all about it. But that doesn't mean that the system itself is bad. In fact, the system of polygyny, the benefit of that system outweighs the harm of the system. And it doesn't mean that every individual that it's good for him to marry more than one wife. But as a system as a whole, it is beneficial. It is more beneficial than not having it. Otherwise, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would not have legislated it. Okay, has Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prohibited us from doing things that are beneficial, that have some benefit to it? Like what? Like drinking alcohol, and gambling. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala specifically says in the Quran, فِيهِمَا إِثْمٌ كَبِيرٌ وَمَنَافِعُ لِلنَّاسِ, that in those 2 things there are great sin and they are benefit for the people. وَإِثْمُهُمَا أَكْبَرُ مِنْ نَفْعِهِمَا. But the sin involved in it is greater than the benefit. So when the sin is greater than the benefit, then what? Then that thing is impermissible. So it's the concept of weighing the pros and the cons, or the benefit and the detriment, and that includes the entire deen of Islam. There's no exception to that rule. Everything that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has legislated for us is either entirely beneficial or mostly beneficial, overwhelmingly beneficial, and everything He has prohibited is either entirely negative and detrimental or mostly negative and detrimental. What's the second one that we took? The second one, so, the brother over here alluded to it, which is al-wasa'il laha ahkam al-maqasid, means adopt the rules of the ends. What's that mean? What that means is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has prescribed for us certain things that we must do. Anything that is necessary for us to get to that particular obligation also becomes an obligation for us. And we're rewarded similarly. So for example, if I walk from here to the back of the room, do I get any reward for that? No. It's permissible for me to walk. But if I walk from here to the masjid to pray, do I get reward for walking? Yes. Because praying in the masjid for the men in congregation, if we hear the adhan, it is an obligation for us. So now walking also becomes, or some way of getting to the masjid also becomes an obligation. So the means, that is the way I get to something also becomes an obligation. We understand that? Likewise, if a person walks to a bar, then not just going to the bar itself is haram, but his walking, every step he takes is also haram. Understand the concept here? We covered all of these before. I'm just trying to get us up to speed, inshallah. Okay, the third thing that we covered, which was the last principle or the last key, is, yes? Hardship and difficulty is a cause of alleviation or facility and ease in the religion. Al-mashaqqatu tajlibu at-taysir. So when something is difficult for you to do, then the Sharia lightens up for you. Legislation lightens up, becomes easier for you. Anybody remember an example? For example, standing in prayer is what? Standing is a rukn, is an essential part of your prayer. If you have the ability to stand up and pray, but you sit down, then the salat is not accepted for the wajib salat, for the fard salat. So if somebody just went into the masjid right now, and they walk to the masjid, they can stand up, it's normal for them, but they just say, you know what, I think I'll sit this one. I'm going to sit this one. Is their salat accepted? No. The salat is invalid because standing is an essential, it is a rukn, it is an essential part of your prayer. Okay, for a woman who is, let's just say, in her third trimester of pregnancy, it's difficult for her to stand in one place, for longer than a couple minutes. A minute and a half, and it's very difficult for her just to stand in one place. Can she sit down and pray? Yes. Not every single woman, but every woman, each woman knows herself. So she knows that while standing, if she stands in the prayer, it's going to cause her such an abnormal difficulty. She's not going to be able to concentrate on the salat. She's going to be thinking more about how hard it is to stand. So for her, it is permissible to sit down because al-mashaqqatu tajlibu at-taysir. Difficulty is a cause of alleviation. That is, when you have an abnormal difficulty, then the Sharia becomes more lax. And we talked about all of the evidence for each of these three principles. Now, why is this important? Before we get to the fourth key, this is very important for us to study because it gives us a broad understanding of Islam. It's kind of like how you say a bird's eye view, right? I'm sure that many of you like cricket and soccer and these type of things. Excuse me, football, right here? I'm sorry. Soccer is like, okay. So, if you're looking from a distance, you can see all of the players on the field. You can see when a person made a mistake. But when you zoom in, even though it gives you a better view, okay, it doesn't give you a full view. So you can only see certain parts. What we're trying to do today is zoom out. Allow us to see the broad principles of Islam so that we understand what some may call the spirit of the law, right? You know, when they say you want to understand this in a broad context. So by studying the principles of Islam, these principles that we're studying, it allows us to see things a lot more clearly. And it allows us to take the individual ayat and ahadith that we find and understand them in light of the broader context. And that's why it's very important for us, as regular Muslims, not as scholars of Islam, but as regular Muslims, to have a very good understanding of these principles. Do not think that, and you will come across different rulings today. Don't think that you're going to leave here after Isha tonight and you're going to be able to give fatwa. That's not going to happen. But what I do expect is that if you hear fatwa from the scholars of Islam, you'll be able to see how they use these principles in their fatwa. And you'll be able to understand better why there may be a specific text on a topic, and the scholar says, but this is how we should view it in light of the principles as a whole. And so hopefully that's something that we'll cover as we go today, inshallah ta'ala, with the fourth key, which is dealing with ability and necessity. Tahir. Father says.
الوجوب يتعلق بالاستطاعة فلا واجب مع العجز ولا حرام مع الضرورة. Obligation is connected to capacity, so there is no obligation with inability and no prohibition in the case of necessity.
Okay, I want you to just take a minute to let this digest. Obligation, anything that is wajib in Islam, is directly connected to capacity, meaning your ability to do that thing. Now, when we say that something is wajib, the definition of wajib in Islam is ma amara bihi shari' amran jaziman. Anything that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the legislation in general, has commanded to be done, definitely, strict command that it be done. Okay? So this is your obligation. Obligation is connected to ability. And we'll talk, I just want you to get the broad understanding here. So there's no obligation if you don't have the ability to do that thing. You literally do not have the ability to do it, then there's no obligation. For example, if you're in the hospital and you've got IV and all types of things in your veins and you can't put water on your body, do you have to make wudu for salat? Yes or no? No. Is wudu an obligation for salat? Yes, you have to have tahara before you pray. But here you don't have the ability to make wudu, and so there is no obligation with inability. The obligation is lifted. Okay? And there's no prohibition in the case of necessity. And maybe it should say in the case of dire necessity. So things that are normally haram for you to do will become permissible in the case of dire necessity. Let's look at the wording here. Or let's look at some questions. Yeah, follow.
What does obligation is connected to capacity mean? Do the scholars differ about the validity of this maxim? What are some texts?
These are warm-up questions. I want you to get your mind thinking about this. Yeah, go ahead.
The second one, what are some texts from the Quran and Sunnah that point to the validity of this principle? Is a person who cannot pay the full amount of zakat al-fitr, but can pay half required to do so?
How much do you have to pay for zakat al-fitr? 1 sa'. This is not a sa'. What is this? This is a mud. Okay, a sa' is how many? 4 muds. Even though this is not so accurate. There was an actual, you could say, vessel that they used at the time of the Prophet ﷺ called a mud. Okay, which is approximately, in terms of volumes, 0.75 to 0.80 liters. Yani 75 to 80 milliliters. Like, Mashi.
What about a person who can only fast for half a day in Ramadan?
Do you understand the question here? So a person who can't pay the full amount of zakat al-fitr, they don't have a sa' to give, but they have half of a sa'. Do they still have to give that? And what about a person who can't fast the entire day of Ramadan? They're on medication, and they have to take a certain medication, say, at dhuhr time. Do they have to fast from Fajr till dhuhr, because they can do that, or not? You understand the question? Okay, good. Further.
Reading al-Fatiha is an essential element of prayer. Is a person sinful if they can only memorize one ayah? What do they say in prayer, and what's your evidence?
Is a person sinful? They say, listen, I've been trying now for a long time. I cannot get past Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. That's all I have the ability to memorize. Okay? Are they sinful if they can't memorize more than Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen? Even though Fatiha is a rukn, right, of the prayer. It's an essential element. And if they can't, then what do they say in prayer, and what is your evidence? Now,
The person is choking and needs liquid to wash down the food in his throat. The only thing around him is a glass of wine. What does he do? What's your evidence?
can that actually happen? Or is this just something that we make up just so that you can have mental exercise? Sorry? Yeah, it can happen. And I actually, subhanAllah, on the way here, yesterday, on the way here, I was on the plane, and the guy that was pushing the cart, he ran out of everything except for wine. And no apple juice, no orange juice, just his cart. Obviously, there was other stuff on the plane. But imagine now somebody's in the aisle seat, and they're choking, and they need something. That's the only thing there. You understand the concept? The only thing around is a glass of wine. What does he do? And what's your evidence? Yes.
Can a Muslim perform CPR on a man?
What's CPR? But does it stop here, or do they normally have to? Okay. So, is it okay for a Muslimah to perform CPR on a man? Understand the question? You understand the question? Okay, perfect. All right. Further. Right now, let's just go over the general meaning of the principle, and then we'll talk about the evidence. Now, Sheikh, further.
General meaning of this maxim. Obligation is connected to capacity, so there is no obligation with inability and no prohibition with necessity. Obligation, the legal requirement to perform an action in Islam.
Yani, that is, there's no wiggle room. What's the difference between wajib and mustahab? Huh? Wajib is something that you have to do. Allah commanded you to do it, and you have to do it. If you don't do it, then you are sinful. Mustahab is also commanded in Islam. But if you don't do it, then you are not sinful. Then you're not sinful. So an example of wajib is the first hajj that you make. Mustahab is your second hajj, your third hajj. Wajib, salat al-dhuhr. 2 rakats after salat al-dhuhr. Mustahab or wajib? Mustahab. Okay? If you don't do it, then you are not sinful. Even though, and this is something to pay close attention to. First thing you'll be asked about in Yawm al-Qiyamah from your actions is what? Is your salat. So, if your salat is good and it's sound, then the rest of the questioning is going to be easy. And if there's some deficiency in your fard salat, not meaning in number, not meaning that you used to pray only 4 times or 3 times a day, or you pray once in a while. No, not that kind of deficiency. But your salat wasn't whole in terms of your being into it. You know, in other words, you said Allahu Akbar, and then immediately you start thinking about the rest of the things you need to do for today. Oh yeah, I need to take my wife shopping tonight. And then, but it's cheaper over there. So I'm going to convince her that we're going to go to this place. And you know, mashallah, all of this is happening in salat. Imam is on second rakat, third rakat. You don't know. You have no clue. When he salams out, you salam out. Alhamdulillah, khalas. What did you understand from salat? Not too much. So that's deficiency in the salat. It doesn't mean that the salat is invalid. But how do you make up for those deficiencies? With a lot of nawafil. And so you should not, if you have the ability, you should not be leaving off praying 2 rakats before Fajr, praying 4 before Dhuhr, and 2 after Dhuhr, and 2 after Maghrib, and 2 after Isha. Because whatever deficiency you have in your fard, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands the angels, he says, Unzuru, hal li abdi min tatawwur. Look at what my servant has from tatawwur, from voluntary actions. And that's used to make up for the deficiency in your fard. Anyway, the obligation are those things which you are legally required to do in Islam. Capacity.
The ability, usually physical or financial, to perform an action.
Right. So, for example, a person who lives in Canada, what means do they need to perform Hajj? How do they get to Mecca? On a plane. Okay? If they don't have the ability to get on a plane, some people cannot. Some people just simply cannot get on a plane. Whether it's due to a mental anxiety or there's some physical inability for them to get on a plane, even with drugs and all these type of things. Do they have to make Hajj? Yes or no? No, because they don't have the ability. They don't have the ability to get to Mecca. There's nowhere, you can't make Hajj in Toronto. It's not going to happen. So they can't get to Mecca. They can't get on a plane. We're not going to say in this day and time where they can catch a boat to Saudi Arabia. That's not happening either, because then you have to put them like in the trunk of a car or something. They're going to die. So they don't have the ability to get to Mecca. Whatever other reason there may be. Okay. We can say forget that. Maybe there are two, for example, subhanAllah, some people, and this just happened, well, alhamdulillah, not too long ago. A friend, his mother took Shahada at 93 years old. 93. She still has, her mind is still okay, but she doesn't have the physical ability to do much. She doesn't have the physical ability to make Hajj. Does she have to make Hajj? Not physically. She has to, if she has the financial ability, she has to give the money to someone to perform Hajj on her behalf. Because the ability for Hajj is 2 types combined. physical and financial. So if a person doesn't have the physical ability, but they do have the financial ability, then they do have to pay someone to perform Hajj on their behalf, or give the money to someone to perform Hajj on their behalf. So capacity means the actual ability. Okay, we said that standing up in prayer is a rukn of your salat. It is an essential element of your prayer. But somebody who's in a wheelchair and cannot stand up, do they have to stand in prayer? No, they don't have the physical ability to do so. So this is what we're talking about when we say capacity.
Prohibition, anything forbidden in Islamic law.
Al-haram or muharram. And we all know what haram means. So this is a prohibition. Yes?
Necessary, a severely abnormal hardship as determined by Islam.
Okay. Here, this one we have to stop for a second and really understand what is darura, because this is the word we're using here, necessity. Darura. How many of you have heard this term before? Darura. This is daruri or darura. Okay. What does darura mean? Sorry? An urgent need. Okay. That's a good translation. Anybody else? Okay, let me give you an example. Any of you live in the West? Or have lived in, for example, America, Europe, so forth? Okay, good. Have you ever heard people say, I have to, it's darura for me to take this mortgage out on my home because owning a house is darura? Tahir, we're going to ask you, is owning a house darura? What do you think? No. Yes, no? Why isn't it a darura? Because you can rent. Okay, so there's another option that we have here. There's another option that we have here, which is to rent. Is having a house, is living in a house darura? Yes. Is owning the home you live in a darura? No. Okay. In general. But let's look at it a little differently. Let's say Brother Ahmed has 9 children. Okay? He has 9 children. Anybody here have 9 children? Masakin. 16, anybody? No, alhamdulillah, I know people. That's great. SubhanAllah. The Prophet ﷺ said, Tazawwaj al-wadud al-walud. Marry the woman who is loving and gives, he says walud, which means that she is able to bear a lot of children. And you kind of know this from looking at the family. Tazawwaj al-wadud al-walud. فَإِنِّي مُكَاثِرٌ بِكُمْ الْأُمَمْ. Prophet ﷺ said, because I want to have the greatest or the largest number in my ummah. So I know people with 16 children, 20 children, alhamdulillah. 9 children. And he goes to try to rent a place. Do any of you own place here? Anybody own something? Nobody owns a home here? You own her. Would you rent to somebody with 9 children? He says no. Most people will not. It's going to be very difficult for you to find somebody. So you know what people wind up doing? They wind up lying. How many children do you have? 3, 4. Because here they can't find a place to live. They cannot find a place to live because nobody is going to rent a home to them. Now, this person has a steady job and he's able to go to the bank and get a loan for the mortgage. But the loan is an interest-bearing loan. And interest in Islam is haram, right? So what does this person do? You understand the dilemma? here he has to find a place. I'm not giving a fatwa here. I'm just telling you how you think through this. So he's stuck between a rock and a hard place. Either he lies so that he can live in someone else's home and rent from them, or he takes out an interest bearing loan so that he can purchase a home. Maybe that's his only two options. Sometimes there's a third option, which is you can find an Islamic mortgage, Sharia compliant, that's what they call it in the West. They say Sharia, yani Sharia compliant loan. If that's available, then even if it's more expensive in the long run, then he has to do what complies with the Sharia, even if it is costing him more. Anyway, the point is, do we understand the concept of necessity? Necessity in Islam, and I just want us to understand darura, because some people say darura and they don't really mean darura. It's not really a necessity. There are 5 major, what they call ad-dururiyat al-khams, 5 major necessities in Islam. And it's tied directly with what they call maqasid al-sharia, or the higher objectives of the sharia. So our religion has come to preserve 5 things in general. Who knows them? Anybody? You can work together on this one. Yes? Life. Number 1 is not life. What's number 1? The deen itself. And then number 2 is life. Why is life number 2 and religion number 1? Because what? Because without the deen, how are you living? And that's true. Because life does not have purpose without deen. Without deen, life simply does not have purpose. So deen, then life, then what? Al-ird, which some people translate as progeny or honor. It can mean both, okay? Wealth and, before wealth, mental health, your aql, protecting the mind. And then number 5 is your wealth. So when we talk about necessity, let's understand this very well. Necessity has to be tied to one of those 5 things. Either the protection of deen, life, and the extension of life, and it's always mentioned when we talk about darura, extension of life is your limbs. Yani, if you don't do this haram thing, you're going to lose your hand, you're going to lose your foot, or you're going to lose a manfa', which means one of your senses. You're going to lose the ability to see or the ability to hear. All of these are connected to life and quality of life. So there are some things that you can do that are haram in general. These things are haram in Islam, but for the protection of life, you may have to do one of those things. Likewise, the protection of honor, or your family, your progeny, offspring, the protection of your mental health, or the protection of wealth, which we'll see inshallah ta'ala. So this is all related to necessity. There are other things that are not directly related to necessity, as we'll see. Tayyib. So this maxim is comprised of 2 principles. Fadal, Sheikh.
Obligations are lifted due to inability.
So this is 1. Obligations are lifted due to inability. And number 2,
Impermissible things are allowed in the presence of
duress or necessity. Tayyib. Perfect. All right. Let's go back. Before we go to the proofs real quick, we'll talk about Hajj. We said, for example, somebody became Muslim at the age of 93. They can't get on a plane. They don't have the ability to make Hajj. So Hajj, we said, for them is not wajib, unless they have the financial ability. But physical making of Hajj is not wajib. Right. What if somebody says, for example, I can't make Hajj, and you say, why not? says, Wallahi, it's just so difficult to leave my family for that long. Do we say, oh yeah, this is darura? You don't have the ability. You don't have the ability, so therefore you don't have to make hajj. Who agrees with him? Nobody? Nobody loves their family that much? None of you brothers love your wives that much? Oh yes. So no, we would say to this person that if your job told you you need to go somewhere for 2 weeks, you know what he would do? He's going to go somewhere for 2 weeks and he's going to tell his family, I'm really sorry, but I got to go for 2 weeks. I'll be back as soon as I can. And he's not going to lose his job because of that. So the same way, this person, it may be a difficulty, but it is not here. We're not going to say this person doesn't have the ability. We're not going to say they are incapacitated or don't have the ability. Person says, I can't pray at work. Prayer is an obligation, but I don't have the ability to pray at work. So what do you mean you can't pray at work? It says, oh, it's just not enough time. There's not enough time to pray. Then we say, don't you take a lunch break? Yes, but I need the lunch. And I need the whole hour for lunch. Say, no, you do have the ability to pray. But what if the person says, I'm a doctor, and sometimes we have to go into 7-hour surgeries. And it starts before Dhuhr. And it doesn't end until Maghrib. Now what do we say? We say, yes, in this case, you don't have the ability, so you make it up when it's over. And there's no sin in this scenario because it wasn't an obligation in that sense. That obligation was lifted for you to pray at the specific time because you literally were unable to do so at that time because someone's life depended on it. You understand? طيب. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Fadal, Sheikh.
Proofs for no obligation with inability. فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ مَا اسْتَطَعْتُمْ. Keep your duty to Allah as much as you can.
So here we see the word al-istita'ah, okay, which means the ability to do something. So you have taqwa of Allah, you keep your duty to Him and you fear Him as much as you are able to. The things that are beyond your ability, then you are not held responsible for. Yes.
وَلِلَّهِ عَلَى النَّاسِ حِجُّ الْبَيْتِ مَنِ اسْتَطَاعَ إِلَيْهِ سَبِيلًا. Pilgrimage to the house is a duty owed to Allah by all who can make the journey.
By all who can make the journey. It doesn't say here it's difficult. If it's difficult, then you don't have to do it. If it's difficult and you can still do it, then you still are obligated to do it. Here we're talking about ability. No. All right. So those are the proofs for the first part, which is that obligation is connected to capacity. Obligation is connected to capacity. One thing we understand here is the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because He has made things obligated on mankind as a whole. And when that becomes difficult for a particular individual, then the obligation becomes lifted for that individual. And this is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy on this ummah, the ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Now we're going to move to the second part, which is nothing is forbidden with necessity. And wallahi, we have to understand this. Yes? Raise your voice, please.
I have a question about the example that you have raised.
Yeah.
That example was the man with the 9 children.
The man with the?
9 children.
Hey, with the 9 children, yes.
He could not presumably he could not find the second to run him or her clips. And I wasn't quite sure how you left, what was the conclusion there.
There was no conclusion. Yeah, I'll get to that, inshallah. I'll talk about it. We're going to talk about that under this principle here. I just wanted to get your brain moving.
Yeah, but I wasn't quite sure if
Yeah, because I didn't mention the conclusion. That's why. We'll get there, inshallah. Don't worry. I'll get back to that example of the person with the 9 children, just so that you understand what he's saying. The person who has the 9 children and nobody will rent to him. Okay, he has no place to live unless he purchases or he lies. So we'll talk about that, inshallah. All right. Nothing is forbidden with necessity. And here, when we're talking about necessity, we're talking about an urgent, dire need, or what is known in Islam as ad-darura. And we're not talking about something that is just going to make life a little easier for you. All right? And so it's very important that we understand this, because so many people use this. They use this principle in Islam. They never heard of it before. They never studied it. But if you ask him, Yaqi, why are you doing so? Oh, this is darura. Really? Well, did you ever study what darura is and the concepts that are related to it? So it's very important for us to understand this. Naam, Yaqi, fadal.
وما لكم ألا تأكلوا مما ذكر اسم الله عليه وقد فصل لكم ما حرم عليكم إلا ما اضطررتم إليه. And why should you not eat of that over which Allah's name is pronounced, when He has detailed for you what is prohibited for you, unless you are compelled by necessity?
Unless you are compelled by necessity. As Saadi rahimahullah ta'ala says that this ayah is explicit in making permissible the haram if a person is in dire need of that thing. Okay? So this is in the context of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has forbidden us to eat. Like that which has been slaughtered in other than His name, that which is considered mayta, yani it died on its own, for example, or it died in a way that it was not slaughtered, or, for example, the meat of swine and so forth. Now.
فمن اضطر غير باغ ولا عاد فلا إثم عليه إن الله غفور رحيم. But if anyone is compelled without desiring or exceeding, he commits no sin. Allah is forgiving and merciful.
Okay, I want us to understand this part. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَمَنِ اضْطُرَّ. But if anyone is compelled, there is a darura. غَيْرَ بَاغٍ وَلَا عَادٍ. Yani, what does it mean when a person is baghi or adi? Min al-baghi. What this means here, it says here, without desiring or exceeding. What this means here is the person does not have a halal option. It doesn't mean that the halal option is not as attractive for him as the haram option. It means he has no halal option. So, for example, he's in severe pain, and where he's at in the hospital, the only thing that they have for pain is morphine, for example. And morphine is what? It's a drug, it's an intoxicant. Okay? Can he get the morphine? If there's no halal option that is going to do the job, yani if you give him paracetamol, it's not gonna do anything. If there's no halal option, then in this case, it becomes permissible. We clear on that? It's not something that he wants to do. He doesn't have a desire to be intoxicated or, to take drugs. But there's no halal option. Wala adin. Yani it says, or without exceeding the limit. So what that means is, if one shot is enough, then he takes what? 1. You don't overload. 2 and 3 and 4. And similarly in this case, let's just go back to the case of the person with 9 children. Okay? This person can get a loan, and I'm just throwing it out there, and we'll get back to the details. But this person can take a loan and get a house that costs, for example, $250,000, and it's large enough for his family. Or he can take a loan for $500,000 and get a mini mansion. And he qualifies for both. in this scenario, if he goes beyond what he needs for his family, then he is adin. He's exceeded the limits, and that is haram without a doubt. You understand? And so there's several examples, and we have to look at this, because a lot of times we look at the ease of the Sharia of Islam and we say, Alhamdulillah, Allah has made things easy and there's nothing haram. There's nothing haram if I'm in dire necessity. But then we go beyond the limit. And that's going to be seen in some of the examples that we cover, bidnillahi ta'ala. Now, here are some examples of this maxim.
Anas ibn Malik radiallahu anhu narrated that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam granted a concession to Zubayr ibn Awam and Rahman ibn Auf, allowing them to wear silk shirts because of a rash they were suffering from.
Okay, so the Prophet ﷺ held up gold in one hand and silver in another hand, and he said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala harrama hadayn ala dhukuri ummati, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made these two impermissible for the men or for the males of my ummah, and he has permitted it for the women. طيب. But here, the Prophet ﷺ said, or he made it permissible for Zubair and Abdurrahman bin Auf radiallahu ta'ala anhuma to wear silk shirts. Why? Because they had a rash. Because they had a rash. Does that sound like darura? I want you guys to think about these texts. Work with the text. Does that sound like darura? Yes? Okay. What does it relate to? Does it relate to deen? Does it relate to life? Does it relate to your honor? Okay, what did we say when we talked about life? We said always life doesn't just include your actual losing of your life, but also your limbs and your senses, your ability to see, hear, so on and so forth. Okay, what's happening here is that this is a severe difficulty that would come if a person had to wear a material that they would constantly have to scratch themselves, to the point that they may lose their skin. It would affect every aspect of their lives. I mean, imagine, how are they going to pray when they're itching the entire time in salah? You understand? So this becomes an abnormal difficulty that is going to affect their physical health as well as their deen. But I want us to look at, there's another narration, because this one is Sahih Bukhari. Another narration of the same hadith mentions that the Prophet ﷺ gave them this concession, fi safarin, fi min hikkatin kanat bihima. So it was during travel for a rash that they had. So let us look at this. This happened while they were traveling, which means that it was confined to a specific period of time. They weren't just allowed to wear silk for the rest of their lives. They were allowed to wear silk for how long? For the time that they had the rash. Okay? غَيْرَ بَاغٍ وَلَا عَادٍ. Not out of desire, meaning that there's no halal, there wasn't a halal option for them, and not exceeding the limit. So once the rash stopped, then they're not going to continue to wear silk. Okay? So, for example, if you look at Al-Hajj, how many of you have made Hajj before? Anybody? Have you ever made Hajj in the winter months? Anybody? Okay. Hajj in the winter, how is Muzdalifah? Muzdalifah gets super cold in the winter months, to the point that sometimes a person may feel like they're getting sick, and then they have to cover their head. Okay? On Muzdalifah. Now, in Muzdalifah, you are in ihram. And for a man in ihram, you're not supposed to cover your head. Okay, but in this scenario, you can cover your head. You can cover your head to the extent that it is necessary for you not to get sick. And then you have a fidya to pay, but you're not sinful. Now, what if a person says the next day, when it's sunny outside, well, I just covered my head yesterday, so today I'm going to wear a baseball cap because it's sunny outside? What do you think? No, you have to, because the necessity has stopped. Once the cold has gone, the necessity has stopped. So you don't go beyond what is necessary. All right? Bismillah. Fadal.
Aisha radiallahu anha said, Hind, the wife of Abu Sufyan, said to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Abu Sufyan is miserly.
Yani stingy. He's stingy. Yeah.
And does not give my children and me adequate provisions for maintenance unless I take something without his knowledge.
In other words, he has some money on the side, okay, but he doesn't give us enough money to take care of ourselves, for me and the children. And the only way is if I take the money without him knowing. Okay?
The Prophet ﷺ said to her, take from his possessions on a reasonable basis that much which may suffice for you and your children.
Yani, in other words, take that which will reasonably suffice you and your children. Okay. What here is haram? What's haram? Stealing, taking someone's money without their knowledge. Is that the only thing that's haram here? Speak up, speak up. Being miserly, okay. Okay, let me ask you something. Is it permissible? Okay, do you think if Abu Sufyan heard somebody calling him stingy, that he would like that? Radiallahu anhu? Do you think he would like that? Okay, so she said this behind his back. What's that called? Backbiting. That's ghiba. That's ghiba. So Hind, radiallahu ta'ala anha, she does ghiba here, and she's stealing his money. And both are permissible. Because, what? La muharrama or la harama ma'ad darura. Because she has a necessity here. What's the necessity? What's the necessity related to here? It is. It's related to her ability to continue to live. Because without those provisions, she's going to be in a position where either she can't live or she's going to have to do things that are maybe perhaps impermissible to live. So she goes to the Prophet ﷺ and she does ghiba. And this is permissible here to the extent that is necessary. غَيْرَ بَاغٍ وَلَا عَادٍ. And she doesn't have an alternative. How else is she going to get this point across to the Prophet ﷺ? She has to. She doesn't have a halal option. And she doesn't go beyond what is necessary. She doesn't say to the Prophet ﷺ, other than what he needs to know for this particular case, which is about money. She doesn't say, for example, that Abu Sufyan also, he beats me. He's guilty of domestic abuse. He also doesn't get up in time for Fajr. He also doesn't, she only mentions what is necessary to get her rights in this particular scenario. We understand that? So she doesn't exceed. Likewise, the Prophet ﷺ says, take that which is reasonable. He says here, khudi ما يكفيكي, what suffices you and your child. What suffices you بالمعروف, and in a reasonable amount. So she can't go now and start taking other things because now, oh, well, now I got a license to steal and I need some new clothes too. And I want, I want some new clothes and I want to eat like this too. I want steak and, you know, all of the good things. So within reason, you understand? So we're also limiting the amount that is being taken here. All right? But this is an example, a real life example from the life of the Prophet ﷺ, where something was haram and the Prophet ﷺ made it permissible here in this particular scenario. Right now I want you to work with a partner. A partner means one person. So I want you to turn to the person either to the right or left of you. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 15. Okay, I got it, don't worry. So we have an even amount of people here. So just turn to the person next to you. And you're going to work with your partner. We have 4 examples here. There's 2 things I want you to do. Read the first, Sheikh. Identify.
Identify the prohibited act in each of the following examples, then determine to what extent it is necessary to do the prohibited act.
All right, so what I want you to do is look at this thing here and tell me what's impermissible about this thing anyway. What is prohibited here? Or why is there something prohibited? And then, to what extent is it necessary for you to do this prohibited act? And I'm going to give you 4 minutes. I'm going to give you 4 minutes, 1 minute to work on each one of these. And then we'll reconvene for about 10 minutes afterwards to go over the questions and some other further examples. And then we're going to take a break before Salatul Maghrib. All right, so look, everybody have a partner? Everybody speak the same language as your partner? If not, just go for it in English, huh? Okay. So with your partner, number one. Can everybody see this here? Can you see this? That one's not clear. The women always get the short end of the stick in these type of things. It's clear on this side. I'm gonna read it. And I want you, maybe you need to write it down. Number 1, commercial car insurance. Commercial car insurance. The normal car insurance, not the ta'awuni, not the, I don't even know how they translate that one. How do they translate the ta'awuni insurance? Well, Allah married if third party will, sorry? Takaful, yeah. But in English, how do they translate the ta'awuni? Cooperative insurance, not the cooperative, commercial car insurance. Number two, exposing your awra for medical reasons. Exposing your awra, your private area, which is going to be different for men and women, for medical reasons. Number 3, rescuing someone of the opposite gender. Okay, so you're going to do with your partner, you're going to identify, well, what's wrong with that in the first place? What's the issue here? Or what possibly could be the issue? And then you're going to look at to what extent is necessary to do this particular act. And then number 4, speaking ill about a Muslim seeking marriage. In other words, someone comes to you and they say, Brother Abdullah has come to me to marry my daughter. And you say, wait a minute. Abdullah is so-and-so? Oh, this guy is A, B, C, D. Okay? Saying something bad about a Muslim seeking marriage. Identify what is prohibited and then determine to what extent it is necessary to do the prohibited act. You have 4 minutes. Okay, so number 1, and I want you to be pretty sure of your answer. Don't take any wild guesses. If you're pretty sure of the answer, 2 questions. Number 1, what is it that is prohibited here? And what extent is it going to be necessary? So let's look at commercial car insurance. Who wants to take a stab at it? Who wants to answer this question? Oh, nobody. Okay, go ahead, for the brother here.
Okay. Car insurance, not allowed general, but if the
Why isn't car insurance allowed? Why? What's the problem with car insurance? Commercial car insurance.
you're paying money for something that you don't know if it's going to happen or not.
Right, you're paying for something that has a very high degree of uncertainty. And the Prophet ﷺ, as Abu Hurairah radiallahu ta'ala anhu narrated, Nahan Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and bay'il gharar. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam prohibited transactions of gharar, of high, where there's a high degree of uncertainty. In other words, you don't really know what you're getting here. I'll give you an example. Somebody pays $200 a month for their car insurance. And this is like common, honestly, in certain places. $200 a month for car insurance. How much does that turn out to be a year? $2,400. 10 years? $24,000. And they didn't have one accident. So they paid $24,000. What did they get in return? Nothing. Okay, you got another person, they pay $200 a month. 3 months in, yani how much did they pay? $600. 2 months in, they have an accident, the damage total $40,000. They pay $600 and they got back in return $40,000. The other person, same plan, paid $24,000, they got back nothing. Okay? So this is why there's a lot of uncertainty in the insurance world in general. Okay? And this is one of the reasons why the scholars of Islam say that this type of commercial insurance is impermissible. Okay? So, to what extent is it necessary?
So let's say if you're living in a country where you have an obligation to make the car insurance, so you have to choose I would say, the cheapest option, and let's say you have full insurance, third party, so you go for third party, you don't go full, and sitting there, okay, if I have to make it, let me choose.
Right. So the extent that is necessary would be if you live in a country where it is an obligation. You cannot own a car without paying car insurance. And owning a car, we can say, in most places, is a darura. Okay? It is a necessity for you to have in most places. That doesn't mean that it's like that everywhere. Okay? But let's just assume that in this particular place, we can say that it is a darura, it is a necessity, or it is what they call a haja, which is a need that tunazzal manzilat ad-darura, that takes the place of a darura. Yani it's almost like it's a darura. And that is also a different category, but it almost takes the same ruling. So here, we would say that owning a car is at the very least a great need. And I cannot own this car without having insurance. Okay. Now, as the brother mentioned, there are various options for me. I can have what they call liability, which is what's required from me by the law, or I can have full coverage, which is not required by the law. So which one do I get? I get the one that's required by the law, because having full coverage is not a requirement by the law, and it is not a necessity for me. And I'm only able to do this thing that is initially haram to the extent that it is necessary. I have to limit it to that point. And so I can't go now and say, wow, I want full coverage for my car just for peace of mind. You should have tawakkul for peace of mind. If you want peace of mind, you need to learn how to put your trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and know that He is not going to hold you or not going to put a burden on you larger than you can bear. And this is obviously going to change. There are other scenarios, homeowners insurance, and all of these other type of things. We're not here to give fatwa. We're here to give broad principles. As it relates to you and your specific situation, that's something that you need a specific fatwa for. But I want you to understand broad scenarios. 1 minute. Is it directly related to commercial insurance?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
There are some companies that sell what they call Islamic products, insurance products.
Yes.
What about that?
Yeah, well, look, right now, that's why I mentioned commercial car insurance, because most of these types of things are outside of the realm of what the Muslim scholars have done to try to bring corrective measures to what's out there in a conventional manner. So there are mortgages all over the United States, for example, and in Canada. There are options for Islamic mortgages. Now, we can debate the how compliant they are to Islam, but in general, those Islamic options are going to be better than the conventional options that are out there. So I'm not talking about the Islamic products, if we can say that term. All right, number 2, exposing the awrah for medical necessity. Any physicians here? Okay, 1, 2. Anybody else? Physicians, nurses? I'm sure we have some nurses here, right? Okay, what we find in a lot of hospitals is that people are left exposed, even though this is from the ABCs of medical care, but people are left exposed for people that are not necessary to see them are able to see them. All right? So when we say exposing the awrah for medical purposes, what are we talking about? So anything that would be generally considered your private area. Now, for women, that's different from men. And for women, for example, who in general, they are going to be covered fully in front of men. They're not even going to show their faces. When they go to the doctor, if the doctor happens to be a male and that is the doctor that they have to see for this particular illness that they have, then they are only allowed to show that which is necessary to show. And vice versa with the men. For a doctor to do a colonoscopy, what do they have to see? Okay, the rear. Do they need to see the front? No. Then that should not be exposed to the best of one's ability. Do we understand the concept here? And even the doctor himself, he should be very careful not to expose the patient more than what is necessary, because looking at the awrah is haram. Clear? Okay. Tahir. And only you look to the part that is necessary. All right. A dentist, for example, needs to see the patient's mouth. Okay? And you don't need to go in and take the entire abaya off for the dentist. No, sahih. Because sometimes this stuff happens just because, it's the doctor and we just get loose. I have to be very careful, and even the doctor needs to be sensitive. Okay, rescuing someone of the opposite gender. What's the problem here? When you rescue someone, what's going to happen? You're going to touch them. And this person is not permissible for you to touch. Okay? So, to what extent is necessary? Give the mic to somebody over here. Inshallah.
As long as the danger is removed, the person is safe from that situation.
Again?
As long as the danger is removed from the person, from the organ.
Right. So once the person is removed from the harm and that their life is stable at this point, then at this point you should not be touching this person anymore, and you should only touch what you need to what you need to touch. If it's a situation where you're rescuing someone from fire and you can lift them up like this, there's no reason for you to touch the person's breast. For what? You only touch what is necessary to the extent that is necessary. Okay, perfect. Speaking ill about a Muslim seeking marriage. What's wrong with this scenario here? This is backbiting. This is backbiting. And backbiting is haram. In fact, it is a major sin. It's not something that we should take lightly. Tahir. Speaking ill about a Muslim. Okay, so what extent is necessary here? Sorry? Answer direct questions. Okay. Okay. What if the person doesn't ask you the right questions?
Preventing the harm. I know that these guys, maybe I dealt with him with money before, I know how to, yeah. So we need to highlight these things, preventing the harm that may happen to them.
Right, right. Well, basically anything that is pertinent to the marriage that would help this person make an informed decision, those are the things you mentioned. Things that are beyond that, then you don't need to mention them about this person, even if you know. Okay? So those things that are pertinent to the marriage itself. Similarly, if you know somebody that wants to go into business with a person, and you don't need to go beyond those things that are directly related to interactions, to the honesty of this person, to their integrity. You don't need to go beyond those things. So you stick to what is important for them to know for that particular subject. All right. Okay, we're going to wrap up now, inshallah. Do we need to stop now? Okay. There's just a little bit left. We'll cover it after Maghrib, bi'idnillahi ta'ala. We're going to stop now for refreshments and for Salat al-Maghrib. And then when we return, inshallah, we'll finish up this portion and we'll move on to the fifth key, bi'idnillahi ta'ala. Sallallahu alaihi wa barak ala nabiyyina Muhammad.
Like you know, inshallah, the refreshment is right outside this door, so the brothers will, inshallah, very calmly try to make your way through, and then, inshallah, receive the salat to the masjid, and then we come back, inshallah, right after salat. Sisters, you know your exit, this is just refreshments right outside.
Alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah. وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه أما بعد. So this last key, if you will, the last principle and maxim that we covered is dealing with its two parts. We're talking about no obligation if you do not have the ability, so no obligation in the absence of ability or capacity. And that there is nothing that is haram when there is a true darura, when there is an urgent and dire necessity. And so here, to kind of sum this up, to kind of sum up what we've taken, there are two statements that the scholars use that I want you to be familiar with so that when you come across them, you'll understand what's being said. The first, ad-darurat tubihu al-mahdhurat. That is, that necessity removes restriction, that anything that was unlawful is permitted when there is a necessity. And this is what we've been talking about. The second one is very important for us, and we're going to talk about some examples, and we've covered some examples in the previous session, which is ad-daruratu tuqaddaru biqadriha. That the permission is limited to the extent of the necessity. So for example, and we talked about this with the example of Hind, radiyallahu ta'ala anha, who when she went to the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, and she mentioned to him that Abu Sufyan, her husband, is miserly. She said he's stingy. Rajulun shahih. So that's ghiba, which is haram in Islam, but it's permissible to the extent that is necessary for the mufti, in this case the Prophet ﷺ, to give her the answer that she needs. And then the Prophet ﷺ said, take what suffices you. Don't take more than that. Take what suffices you and your children bil ma'ruf. And it's something that is customary for you and your children, something that is reasonable for you and your children. So it's restricted to that. Okay, right now, there's this big issue, at least in the West, about medical marijuana. Have you heard of that? Medical marijuana. So, marijuana is halal or haram? Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. It is haram, yes. Sorry? What is marijuana? Alhamdulillah, you don't know. Some people say, why is it haram? It grows from the earth. There's a lot of things that grow from the earth, like cocaine, for example, and it's still haram. And why do we say it's haram? It's because it's an intoxicant. And anything that messes with your mental health is haram. Why is that? It's because it's going to affect one of the dururiyat al-khams, right? One of the 5 necessities, which is preservation of your mind, your aql, your mental health. Okay? So, this thing comes and it obstructs your ability to think clearly, which is going to affect your prayer, it's going to affect the way that you interact with people and so forth. And this deen of Islam, alhamdulillah, has come to protect us. And so it protects us both physically and mentally. So, what we have here is medical marijuana, which they say, for example, is used to help with certain ailments that people may have, certain pain. For some people, it's prescribed for loss of appetite. Okay? They don't have any appetite. They've tried everything else. They're not able to even eat unless they have this marijuana. That's the claim anyway. So, what would we say here if in fact they needed this marijuana? This was the only solution. So the first thing we look at, right? We said غَيْرَ فَمَنِ التُّرَّ غَيْرَ بَاغٍ وَلَا عَادٍ. Whoever is compelled with no other option, there's no halal option, they don't desire this thing, and they're not adin, they don't go beyond what is necessary, then there's no ithm alayh, then there's no sin involved. So here, ad-darurat tubihu al-mahdhurat. Here we have this darura of this person staying alive. The only way they're going to stay alive is if they eat. The only thing that's going to make them eat is if they, I'm saying in theory, is if they have this marijuana. So we would say here that it's permissible, but to what extent? But to what extent? Only the extent that they need to create the appetite that is necessary for them to stay alive. So somebody can't go, for example, and they're smoking the medical marijuana, and they say, man, this makes me feel great. So they go beyond what is necessary for the appetite, and they actually enjoy being high. Okay? Let's look at the second example. We talked about the guy, he's on a plane. They're pushing a cart. The only thing that's on the cart is alcoholic drinks. He's choking. The only thing he needs something to push down. There's no water around, there's no nothing. If he goes try to get up and get water, he's going to die on the way. Only thing he can do now is drink. So he takes a drink of the alcohol, pushes the food down his throat. He gets a taste of it. He says, wow, it's been a long time. Goes back. The first time was permissible. Why? Because it was a necessity. But that necessity, the limit of the necessity is what is, or the permission is only limited to what is actually necessary. He can't go now and say, can I get another bottle of that? Because that was great. All right? So permission, you have to stop where the necessity stops. And this is very important because too many people, they take this rule and they go overboard with it. And this goes back to what the brother was asking about the person who we said has 9 children, for example. Nobody's going to rent to them. Nobody in the West is going to rent to them. So now they have to, they have 2 options. They're either going to lie and they're going to say, yeah, I only have 3 children, okay? Which is a problem because this is directly related to haqq al-ghayr. Yani that is directly related to the rights that somebody else has. Me as a property owner, I have a right to know that you're not going to bring 9 children in my house if you tell me you only have 3. Because 9, that's going to mean a lot of different kind of maintenance and repairs and upkeep and so forth. And you're between this option or taking out a mortgage, which is interest-bearing loan on it, which is haram. What about? Sorry? What about hijrah? Okay. Have you ever tried to make hijrah with 9 children? No, seriously, I'm not trying to be funny, but in general, if you have enough money to make hijrah with 9 children, Allahu A'lam, you have enough to put a good down payment on and get an Islamic mortgage. The point is, I'm putting this in theory because it's not, like I said, these are not fatwa. These are trying to help us understand the way that you work through these scenarios. So this person, this is their option. Now, like we said, this person now can get a house, 4 bedrooms, for example, is sufficient for him and his family. He can find it in a neighborhood that's safe. He's not going to worry about walking outside of his house and being hurt or something like that. And you can say, okay, it's going to cost him $200,000, $300,000. He can't go, and now when he goes to the bank, they say, oh, you have a good job. You're qualified for a $700,000 loan, and you can go get yourself a mansion, you know, and no, because الضرورة تقدر بقدرها. So that necessity is going to be limited to what he actually needs, not what he wants, not what looks better, not which is in the best neighborhood, no, but what he actually needs. So the point here is that we always need to be on the lookout for the extent and not go beyond that. Tahir. Now you're going to test yourself. I want you to work with your partner on these next 6 questions. Just take a couple minutes. I'll give you like 2 or 3 minutes, inshallah, to work with your partner on numbers 1 through 6. Can you see? Can you see over here? Yes? Okay. Do we have a mic on the sister side, Sheikh? No? I think they're working on that. Okay. Bismillah. If you get a mic on the sister side, take 3 minutes. You're going to start now. Number 1, what does obligation is connected to capacity mean? I just want you to explain. What exactly does that mean? Do the scholars differ about the validity of this maxim? 2, what are some texts from the Quran and Sunnah that point to the validity of this principle? Number 3 is a person who cannot pay the full amount of zakat al-fitr but can pay half required to do so. What about a person who can only fast for half a day in Ramadan? Number 4, reading al-Fatiha as the essential element of the prayer to the end. Number 5, a person is choking and needs liquid to wash down the food in his throat. Number 6, can a Muslimah perform CPR on a man? Okay, so talk with your partner about this. Bismillah. Talk with your partner about the answers. I'm going to walk. I need to walk around and make sure you guys are talking. I want you to be sure about your answers. First question. We're going to start on the brother's side, and then the sisters are question number 2. Number 1, what does obligation is connected to capacity mean? What does this mean? What does this mean? Okay, who's got the mic on this side? All right. He's going to, hold on, you pick whoever you want.
There is no obligation
Okay, what is an obligation?
There is something that is obligatory to do. You have to do it to Islam.
Right, so anything that Allah or His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam have instructed us to do, such that if we left it, it would be sinful. Anything that is an obligation upon us is directly connected to our ability to do that thing. If we don't have the ability, then we're not held accountable. Okay. Do the scholars differ about this principle? Or maybe I didn't mention it, but there's ijma' amongst the scholars of Islam that this principle is valid. That this is in fact a broad principle in Islam. There's no difference of opinion amongst the scholars on that. Type number 2 from the sister side. What are some texts from the Quran and Sunnah that point to the validity of this principle?
There is a surah from Quran, let the man always spend from his wealth, and he whose provisions restricted, let him spend from what Allah has given him.
Right, so in Surah At-Talaq, لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا ما أتاها. So in Surah At-Talaq, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that a man should spend, yani on his child, from the divorced wife, from that which he has. If he has a lot of wealth, then he spends from his wealth, and if his provisions are restricted, then he spends from what he can. Tahir, is there okay, one second. Is there a very broad, there's an ayah that's very clear for this principle. It's almost the same wording. لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها. Allah doesn't burden the soul beyond what it can bear. فاتقوا الله مَسْتَطَعْتُمْ. Fear Allah, keep your duty to Allah to the best of your ability. So the taqwa is the taqwa, which is the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but it's to do what He has commanded and to avoid His prohibitions. To do what He has commanded is directly connected to al-istita'a, which is ability. Yes, from the Sunnah. Yes, the Prophet ﷺ said, "Martukum bi amrin fa'tu minhu mastata'tum." If I command you to do something, then do of it what you can. Do of it. So the amr, the command, is directly connected to al-istita'a. Number three, brother side. Fadl Harun, find somebody. Raise your hands very high so Harun can see you. Nobody wants to answer number 3. Are we scared? Okay, good. Alhamdulillah.
For both of these questions, because half a day of Ramadan, for example, this you can if you cannot fast the whole day, or you cannot pay the full amount of zakat al-fitr, it's not an obligation for you.
Okay, everybody agree with that? The zakat part is obligatory. Why? Because, and here's the reason why. Because when it comes to the monetary obligations, one part is not directly connected to the other part. And we're going to talk about this when we talk about ikhlas as well, or the making your actions solely for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So there are some acts of ibadah that the first part of it is not connected to the last part in terms of validity. And other acts of worship are only accepted as a whole. So for zakat al-fitr, in most of the monetary obligations that we have in Islam, if you can't do it all, you can do some of it. And then that sum becomes an obligation on you. So a person who can't pay a full sa', but they have a half of a sa', then they give a half of a sa'. But as for fasting only a half a day in Ramadan, there's no benefit to this, because the fast is only valid when it is the entire day. Allahumma illa, except in the scenario when you're trying to train your children, for example, to fast, and you start them off with a half a day or a little less or longer like this, but that doesn't count as a day of fasting, and you're only doing that for training purposes. Okay? So this doesn't count as a day of fasting. Number 4. Bismillah. Sister side. The Prophet ﷺ said, La salata liman lam yaqra bi fatihatil kitab. Sahih Bukhari and Muslim. There is no salat for the person who doesn't read Al-Fatiha. So is a person sinful if they can only memorize one ayah? Tayyib, anybody going to answer?
For example, for this one, if the person is newly in the birthday and doesn't know anything yet, so the person will not have any sin. So that person should say only like, we need to teach the person like, big prayer, subhanallah, alhamdulillah.
Right. So this person, for example, they're not sinful if the reality is they can only memorize one ayah. Now again, this varies from person to person. And if a person, for example, let's just say they memorize all kinds of songs. You say, subhanallah. You can memorize a whole song. You memorize a whole album and you can't memorize Surah Al-Fatiha. That's because they're not putting in the effort. But there are some people that simply cannot memorize anything. So here, this person they can't memorize one ayah. They're not sinful if they really don't have the ability. What do they say in prayer? As the sister said, they're going to say, for example, Subhanallah, Alhamdulillah, La ilaha illallah, Allahu Akbar, La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah, or some parts of that. And the evidence for that is what? The hadith of Ibn Abi Awfa, where he said that the man came to the Prophet ﷺ and said, I can't memorize anything from the Quran, so help me, what should I be saying in my prayer? Hadith collected by Abu Dawood and Nasir and graded sound by several scholars of hadith. Type number 5. Person is choking, needs liquid to wash down the food in his throat. The only thing around is a glass of wine. What does he do? He is going to quickly do what? He's going to drink it. And what's the evidence for that? Ad-darurat tubihul mahdurat. And that's not a bad idea, actually. Evidence in Islam is Quran, Sunnah, ijma' of the scholars, and qiyas. However, in this particular situation, al-qawa'id al-fiqhiyya that are mujma' alayha, that is, all of the scholars agree to that particular principle. The principle is based on evidence, and therefore the principle itself can serve as evidence. So that's fine. Ad-darurat tubihu al-mahdurat wa la muharrama ma'a-darura. There's nothing impermissible with necessity, and this person is in a dire necessity to save their lives. Number 6, is it permissible for a Muslim woman to perform CPR on a man? Sisters, anybody want to say something on the sister side?
Hello?
Okay.
Well, if there's no one else around, like there is no one, any other guy who can help her, it's only him and her, then she can do that, but she can only just touch him wherever there is necessity, and that's it.
Right. So that's very good. And I'm very glad that the answer said if there's no one else around. Why? There's not a man around. Or let's just say we have a situation where there's a Muslim woman and a non-Muslim woman. Let the non-Muslim woman deal with it. Okay? Why is that important? Because we say غَيْرَ بَاغٍ. Yani, there's no halal option here. So in this scenario, for example, you have a man, he's a lifeguard. at the corniche, for example. And the woman goes in and, you know, starts drowning or something like that. There's nobody else going to save her. He has to save her. But he's going to limit his interaction with her to what is necessary to rescue her, to save her life, to make sure that she's okay and that she's stable, and vice versa. Is it permissible for a man to look at a woman that is not mahram for him? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, وَقُلْ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ يَغُضُّ مِنْ أَبْصَارِهِمْ وَيَحْفَظُوا فُرُوجَهُم. Say to the believing men to lower their gaze, to protect their private parts. For a man that wants to marry a woman, is it permissible for him to look at her? Yes. Yes. But this is for a need. And that need, يُقَدَّرْ بِقَدْرِهَا. So if it's sufficient for him to look at her face, then that's all he looks at. He's not going to look at everything else. No, seriously, it's not funny. If he's the type of person, for example, some men, and I mean this is normal. He wants to look at the hands. Sometimes the hands are going to show age more than the face. Shows how a person is aged and so forth. So he might look at her hands and her face, but you know, it stops at a certain. There's a limit to that, and it should not go beyond that limit. And this is here, even though this is not a darura, there's another principle in Islam. I wasn't actually going to talk about it, but I mentioned it very quickly. And that is al-hajatul amma tunazzal manzilat ad-darura. When there's a general need, okay, it takes the ruling of a darura. And this, as Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala mentions, that this is built into the Sharia. So whenever there's a general need, we're actually going to find that the Sharia has made it so that that thing is permissible. We have explicit hadith where the Prophet ﷺ talked about the permissibility of a man looking at the woman that he wants to marry. And so that's built into the Sharia, even though it's not necessarily a darura, but that's a general need that people have. We're going to move on to the fifth and final principle that we're going to cover bi'idhnillahi ta'ala in this particular series. And that is the topic of sincerity and emulation. Fadl, Sheikh.
Principle 5. The entire corpus of Islamic law is regulated by two criteria: sincerity to Allah and emulation of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
طيب فالشريعة مبنية على أصلين الإخلاص لله والمتابعة لرسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. This is a huge area, or this is the principle in Islam that there is no exception from. Everything in Islam is built upon, the entirety of Islam is built upon al-ikhlas lillah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that a person is sincere in what they do to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that in that act of worship they are following the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And these two are prerequisites for any act of worship to be accepted. Let's look at our questions. Fadl, Sheikh.
What are some proofs from the Quran and Sunnah that indicate the importance of sincerity and emulation?
Sarah, you know, like a woman named Sarah.
Sarah starts Maghrib prayer with the intention of letting others hear her beautiful recitation.
Okay, pay attention here. When she starts the whole thing, when she starts her Maghrib prayer, she wants the people around her to hear how beautiful she recites. Okay?
After the first rak'ah, she corrects her intention so that her prayer is sincerely for Allah. Is her prayer valid?
Is the prayer valid? What does that mean, is the prayer valid? I want you to understand this point. When we say the salat is valid. What's that mean? Right, that it's accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, meaning what? That she does not have to pray it again. Now, let's just rewind for a second. Let's say she started her prayer and she didn't have wudu. Then she remembered, when she finished the prayer, she remembered, I forgot to make wudu. Is the prayer valid? No. Okay, I want you to understand that point. Let's keep moving. Somebody, subhanallah, la qaddarallah, somebody drinks a glass of wine. The hadith of the Prophet ﷺ states that this person's salat won't be accepted from them for 40 days. Okay. Listen. Won't be accepted from them for 40 days. So now, do they leave salat for 40 days? No. What do? They pray. But they don't get rewarded for the prayer, but the prayer removes liability. It removes that responsibility. So there's two things that happen when you pray. One is that you lift the burden, right? You get rid of that liability. I owe this to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I don't, alhamdulillah, I prayed it, I don't owe it anymore. And Allah Azza wa Jalla also rewards you for the prayer. So what happens is, for those 40 days, that person is not being rewarded for prayer, but they still have to pray because they still owe that to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So here is the concept of validity. Their prayer is still valid, but it's not rewarded. So the question here is, Sauda, from the very beginning of her prayer, before she even said Allahu Akbar, her intention is she wants people to hear how beautiful she recites. Then she corrects that intention after the first rak'ah. So 2 whole rak'ahs she prays with good intention. Is her prayer valid? Number 3.
Ahmed gives charity publicly. He gives the first $1,000 to impress people.
They said, who's going to give to build the masjid? He wants everybody to say, I am a generous person. Look at him. He always is the first to give. He always is the first to do this, and he's a great person. And so he gives that first $1,000. He wants to impress people. Yes.
He gives another $500 sincerely for Allah.
So he gives how much altogether? $1,500. Is his charity accepted by Allah? Now,
what are some proofs that all religious innovation is rejected? Why is innovation considered to be a subtle critique of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam?
Why is innovation considered to be a subtle critique? In other words, when a person innovates something in the religion of Allah, why is this actually insulting to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Whereas though a person may feel like, hey, I'm just doing something extra. Why is this an insult to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? We'll talk about that, bi'idhnillah. Okay, so this is to get your juices flowing, inshallah. Further.
Rules of sincerity and emulation. وَمَا أُمِرُوا إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ مُخْلِصِينَ لَهُ الدِّينَ. They were commanded only to worship Allah, sincerely devoting their religion to Him alone.
Their religion, huh? Okay. So, in this ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about the crux of the matter, which is that we devote mukhlisina lahu ad-deen. What is ad-deen? Ad-deen is described in the hadith of Jibreel. At the very end of that hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said to Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, do you know who that was? Right? You know this hadith? And Umar said, what? Allah and His Messenger know best. The Prophet ﷺ said, هذا جبريل أتاكم يعلمكم دينكم. And what is the deen then? Islam and Iman and Ihsan. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has commanded that your Islam be mukhlis for Him, that your Iman be sincerely for Him, and that your Ihsan be sincerely for Him subhanahu wa ta'ala. that you sincerely devote the deen to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That if it's for anybody else, that will not be accepted from Allah, by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And for a lot of us, we don't realize the subtleties of shirk and how it creeps in the heart. Because the opposite of ikhlas is what? Is shirk. If it's not sincerely for Allah, then it's for Allah and somebody else. Even if that somebody else is you. Even if it's self-serving. And this is difficult. There are levels of ikhlas. There are levels of ikhlas. What if a person gives sadaqah because they want Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to cure their sick relative? Have you ever heard of that? Isn't there a hadith where the Prophet ﷺ says, Tadawu bis-sadaqah? Tadawu mardakum bis-sadaqah? Treat your sick ones with sadaqah, by giving away sadaqah. So what if you giving away sadaqah? I give you another example. The Prophet ﷺ said, whoever wants his rizq, yani his provisions to increase, and he wants a long life, then do what? فَلْيَصِلْ رَحِمَهُ. Then let him keep good ties with his family. So what if he keeps good ties with his family? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands us to keep good ties in the Quran. But he's doing it because he wants wealth. He started digging in his pockets. He realized cash flow was running low. He said, let me call my mom up. And, I'm going to keep these good ties. So is it sincerely for Allah? I'm throwing this out there. I want you to think. We're going to answer these questions, inshallah. But don't think that sincerity comes easy. Don't think that ikhlas. Some people, they wake up, they think about the hadith. Man salla ma'al jama'ah fahuwa fi dhimmatillah. Hadith Sahih Muslim. Man salla al-fajr ma'al jama'ah fahuwa fi dhimmatillah. So he prays fajr in jama'ah because he wants Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's protection. Is that sincerely just seeking Allah's pleasure, or he also wants something in return, if you will? Is there a problem with that? A person makes hajj. They want the reward for hajj, but they're also thinking about the tijara that they can do when they're on hajj. I remember back in the day, I don't know, it's not really like that anymore, but years ago, the Russians used to always come with stuff you can never find anywhere else. They have all types of binoculars and things, and they bring it for hajj, and they're coming for hajj, inshallah, they're coming to make, they want the reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but they also want to do tijara. So is this niyyah khalis for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? No, it's not. But is it shirk? Tahir, we talk about that, inshallah. Naam, Sheikh, fadal.
وَمَا آتَاكُمُ الرَّسُولُ فَخُذُوهُ وَمَا نَهَاكُمْ عَنْهُ فَانْتَهُوا. Whatever the messenger gives you, accept it, and whatever he forbids you, abstain from it.
Okay, is this a proof for sincerity or for emulation, that is following the messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam? This is for emulation, for following the messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Okay, and the first one was a proof for what? Sincerity, that you make the deen khalis, that you make your actions sincerely for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now,
فَمَنْ كَانَ يَرْجُو لِقَاءَ رَبِّهِ فَلْيَعْمَلْ عَمَلًا صَالِحًا وَلَا يُشْرِكْ بِعِبَادَةِ رَبِّهِ أَحَدًا. Whoever hopes to meet his Lord, let him do good deeds and join no other deity in the worship of his Lord.
Okay, which one is this for? Proof for sincerity or proof for emulation? Both. For both. Where do we get the following of the Prophet ﷺ? Where does that come in? فَلْيَعْمَلْ عَمَلًا صَالِحًا. Then let him do good deeds. A deed is only salih if it is done the way that the Prophet ﷺ prescribed for us to do it. It's the only way it can be salih. وَلَا يُشْرِكْ بِعِبَادَةِ رَبِّهِ أَحَدًا. And let him join no other deity in the worship of his Lord. That is sincerity. And here what's important to note, we stopping at 8:45? Okay. Here what's important to note is that Allah Azza wa Jalla said in the Hadith al-Qudsi, أَنَا أَغْنَى الشُّرَكَاءِ عَنِ الشِّرْكِ. A lot of people don't really understand this hadith. أَنَا أَغْنَى الشُّرَكَاءِ عَنِ الشِّرْكِ. I am the one who is least in need of a partner. Okay. Anybody here do business? I know there's some business people not raising their hands because I know you. Okay. So, you do business. Most people that do business, they need a partner. They need somebody that's either going to help them with the wealth, that's going to help them perform the actions, that's going to create the connections for them. They need some kind of partner when they do this business. Allah Azza wa Jalla says, أَنَا أَغْنَى شُرَكَائِي عَنِ الشِّرْكِ. I am the one who is least in need of a partner. فَمَنْ عَمِلَ عَمَلًا أَشْرَكَ فِيهِ مَعِيَ غَيْرِي تَرَكْتُهُ وَشِرْكَهُ. So whoever does an action, any deed, and he makes shirk with me. In other words, he does this deed for me and for someone else. Not just that he does it for something else, he does it for me and for something else. Taraktuhu wa shirkahu. I'm going to leave him in his shirk. Allah Azza wa Jalla has no need for it. If it is not sincerely for Allah, 100%. If it's 99% for Allah and 1% for somebody else, taraktuhu wa shirkahu. Al-Khalis means Khalis. There's no mixing of intention in that. And so we have to, a lot of times, subhanAllah, even the way we raise our children, it's very important that we give them these concepts of ikhlas. Don't wake up for Fajr because you're scared of me. Wake up for Fajr because you want to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Get them used to the idea of doing what they do for Allah and avoiding what they avoid from the haram for Allah. Get them used to that concept. Teach them to love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to put their hopes in Allah. Not put their hopes in you as their parents, but put their hopes in Allah, that their reliance, their tawakkul is upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because you want to create these strong hearts that are attached to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now,
Proofs for sincerity and emulation.
part 2. Now.
الذي خلق الموت والحياة ليبلوكم أيكم أحسن عملا. He who created death and life to test you as to which of you is best indeed.
طيب. What is this a proof for? Okay. Maybe some of you, if I say the Fudail ibn Iyad, maybe you'll remember. What is this a proof for? For both. For sincerity to Allah and for emulation, meaning following, sticking to, adhering to the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. This verse was recited in the presence of one of the great scholars of Islam, Fudail ibn Iyad, rahimahullah ta'ala, and he was asked about ahsanu amala, those of you best indeed. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not say akthar amalan, those of you who are most indeed, but those who are best. He said akhlasuhu wa aswabuhu, that is that which is most sincere and most correct. So if an act is sincere but it is not correct, meaning that it is not in compliance with the teachings of Muhammad ibn Abdullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then it is rejected. And if it is according to exterior, it looks like the sunnah of the Prophet alaihi salatu wasallam, but it's not sincerely for Allah, then it is not accepted, it is rejected. Nah. Sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, actions are by their intentions.
And as you know, the latter part of that hadith, so whoever made hijrah for Allah and His Messenger, then his hijrah is for Allah and His Messenger, it's accepted. Whoever made hijrah li dunya, yusibuha amra'atin yankihuha fa hijratuhu ila ma hajara ilayhi. Whoever has made hijrah for some purpose of the dunya, they're looking for some worldly gain or to marry somebody, then his hijrah is for whatever he made hijrah for. Nah.
قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم من عمل عملا ليس عليه أمرنا فهو رد. The Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم said, anyone who does an act that has no precedence in our religion will have it rejected.
Nah. طيب, we'll go through this hadith. I know we have 10 minutes, but I want you to pay attention to this hadith here, because it adds something to what we've already covered. And that is the statement of the Prophet ﷺ, hadith Abdul ibn Sariyah. And this, he said, was the farewell advice from the Prophet ﷺ. And therefore, every Muslim who loves Muhammad ibn Abdullah ﷺ should pay attention to this advice. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Usikum bi taqwallah." I advise you and I am commanding you to fear Allah. Have taqwa of Allah. Put between yourself and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's punishment some barrier. Put a barrier there. Be dutiful to Allah. And I advise you bis-sam'i wa ta'ah. That is to hear and obey. Wa in abdan habashiyya. Even if the one who is in charge of you is an Abyssinian slave. In other words, anarchy is not something that is desirable in Islam. And as some of the scholars of Islam have said, that 100 years under a tyrannical ruler is better than one night of anarchy, when everything is just crazy. And we've seen some evidence of that. طيب, فإنه من يعيش منكم فبعدي فسيرى اختلافا كثيرا. Whoever from amongst you lives is going to see great differing. You're going to see in this ummah, the Prophet ﷺ told his companions, whoever from amongst you all, the companions, whoever from amongst you all lives, you're going to see great differing in this ummah. What is the solution to that problem of differing? فَعَلَيْكُمْ بِسُنَّتِي. The Prophet ﷺ says, so this is what happens when you see all of this differing going on. Hold fast, adhere to my sunnah. Because, and this is where it gets interesting, what is it that causes the differing in the ummah? Is it sticking to the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ? That's what causes us to differ? No, it's when we leave off the sunnah. This is why the Prophet ﷺ said that the Jews have split into 71 sects, that the Christians have split into 72 sects, and this ummah is going to split into 73 sects. What is it that causes sects anyway? It's when people add to the religion or they take away something that is an important, integral part of the religion. Do you know how many Christian sects there are? No, it's more than 72. Sorry? 100 and some. Anybody else? 45,000. Most of them have come within the last 500 years, after the Protestant movement. So the Protestant movement, their whole claim to fame, for lack of a better term, was that we don't need to be restricted to the understanding of clergy of the Bible. So what happened is they deregulated interpretation of their text, even though the Bible has many fallacies in it. But the point is, how do we now interpret the Bible? That became open. That became open. And so everybody that has a new way of interpreting, they create their own sect. And it's the same thing that happens in Islam if we don't stick to the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, and we begin to just interpret the way we want to interpret the religion, then we create one sect after another sect. فَعَلَيْكُمْ بِسُنَّتِي وَسُنَّةِ الْخُلَفَاءِ الْمَهْدِيِّينَ الرَّاشِدِينَ خُلَفَاء الْمَهْدِيِّينَ الرَّاشِدِينَ. So here the Prophet ﷺ says, so adhere to my sunnah and that of the rightly guided Khalifas. Who are the Khulafa al-Rashideen? Scream it out. Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, Ali, radiyallahu ta'ala anhum. Anybody else? La. Best. That's it. 4. So the Prophet ﷺ says, stick to adhere to my sunnah and the sunnah of the Khulafa al-Rashideen. Khulafa al-Mahdiyin al-Rashideen, al-Rashideen al-Mahdiyin. Why didn't the Prophet ﷺ just stop? Say, follow my sunnah. Why did he also mention the sunnah of the Khulafa al-Rashideen? Why is that even important for us? And I really want you to think about this one. Somebody, scream it out, scream it out. No, in the back, yes? Best generation is my generation. Well, why do we need that? Why do we need them? If we have the Prophet ﷺ, isn't his sunnah enough? Yes.
Because there were so many problems after the Prophet died.
Okay, keep going. So there were problems after the Prophet ﷺ died. The Ummah increased.
Different tribes come to Islam with
their own. Time out. Hold on, please. Who just said? I just heard the word. Interpretation. Listen. The Quran is revelation, correct? The direct speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Sunnah is also revelation. Not the direct speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but it is the actions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is revelation. We're not getting interpretation here. You understand? So now we need to look at the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam saying, look at those Abu Bakr, Umar, radiyallahu ta'ala anhuma. Look at Uthman and Ali. Look at how they practiced the revelation. Because that will give you the guidelines for interpretation. To understand how to interpret the text. This is a very important point. It's outside of what we want to study, and I know it's time for us to stop for Salat al-Isha. Sallallahu alaihi wa sallam wa barak ala nabiyyina Muhammad.